This conference will now be recorded.
I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. We will start off with the invocation by Mr. Parker, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Weekly. Please stand as you are able. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, Mr. Weekly, do we have any amendments to the agenda, sir?
No amendments, Madam Chair.
Very good, then we'll move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Do we have anyone here in the boardroom who wishes to provide public comment this evening? Seeing none, Mr. Dines, do we have anyone waiting online to provide public comment? Thank you, Mr. Dines. We'll now close public comment and move on to reports of members of the board. Mr. Parker, would you like to start, sir?
No report, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
No report.
Thank you, Ms. Bender.
No report.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland.
Yes, Madam Chair. So I wanted to let Mr. Weekly and the board know that I received really positive feedback from the residents of Fairview Beach after seeing the results of the water test that was done. I think it really assured them that their quality of water was good and it wasn't an issue with the, I guess, the fecal matter in the water.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. And I have no report. We'll move on to consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I will make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Report from the county attorney, Mr. Britton.
Yes, Madam Chair. You may recall that some time ago we filed a lawsuit. Chris Pomeroy was counsel on that regarding the WIP 3. And they were asked to file a motion to dismiss that case based on a mutual agreement that there would be a roundtable set up and that nothing would take effect. And we were going to have a bunch of meetings beginning in December of last year. And you may recall not having any of those meetings. So we kept up with them like, hey, where's our meetings? We're going to file this motion to dismiss. So council said, we're not having the meetings because they're going to propose legislation that's going to take care of all of our concerns with the WIP 3, the timing, the nutrient discharge, the amount of the funding. Mr. Weekly is an expert in exactly what was wrong with it, but it's all also set out in the lawsuit and all of our objections. In fact, that did happen, and Chris Pomeroy sent us a copy of the legislation, which he says the governor approved WIP 3, a law addressing all of our concerns. So we filed our motion to dismiss as agreed. There is no need for any roundtable negotiations or discussions any longer, and the King George County Service Authority is out of the woods without a scratch. So we got all of the things that were of concern, not just to King George County, but I think it was filed primarily in Hanover, was it, or Henrico? In any event, so all of the counties got what they had requested. I reviewed the legislation, and King George is listed, and our projects are listed in the ownership regarding King George County Service Authority. Mr. Weekly has that as well. So that's why the roundtable didn't occur. That's why we filed the motion to dismiss, and that's why we waited an additional, I guess, year almost to file it, because we weren't still concerned. So that should be the end of that matter. And if anything else comes up of concern, I'm sure that council will let us know.
So, Mr. Britton, before you move on, can I just poll my directors and make sure they don't have questions on that matter before you move on to the next one?
The only thing, yeah, I would just ask, could you send us a copy of that,
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
the information?
Yeah, I was going to make a joke about a FOIA request, but we get
It's
too many
okay,
of
you
those.
can make it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good. Ms. Cleveland, do you have any questions, ma'am?
No questions.
Mr. Morris?
No questions.
Mr. Parker?
The only question, maybe you can answer, maybe you can't, on the new legislation, is there a carve out for King George? Is that what I was hearing? Like, we've got some kind of special exceptions for this county in the legislation, or did they change some of the parameters for smaller counties?
It wasn't, as I read it, and I'm not an expert in it because I wasn't handling the lawsuit itself, but as I read it, no, all of the localities that had the concerns that were represented by Aquila and Chris Pomeroy had similar, there may have been some one-off objections, but similar objections to it. And the legislation that I will forward to you all without a FOIA request, that I'll forward to you all has a laundry list of localities and what they own, bases, military bases, projects, what the timing is on it, what the regulations are, the nutrient discharges, and the funding, minimum funding for those projects through grants and other things, 35% for various projects. We fall under the 35%. Changes the timing of to I think 2026 for the nutrient discharges, and then follows up and says, and if the discharge levels are not what the Commonwealth expects, then there'll be further action. So Mr. Weekly may be able to know exactly the ins and outs of what and how the discharge levels, the timing, and the funding affect the facilities listed. I think there are 3 of them by King George County Service Authority.
Thank you, Matt. So basically, we don't have to have upgrades to meet the 2026 deadline. A lot of those are Hampton Roads. I think the closest, I apologize for the feedback, the closest, I believe, is like Spotsylvania. There's a merger between Fredericksburg and them. They're going to close a facility. So that's a conveyance, which is, we talk about decommission. It's the same thing. DEQ calls it conveyance. There is a funding, as Matt talked about. It's a floor, basically, they set at 35%. So funding will not go below that for any of these projects. So if and when we go to apply for conveyance, we could take an opportunity of that. So that was something, I think, a couple of years ago, the General Assembly considered in their WQIF funding. They just put that language into this bill, and I just forwarded it to you all. So it is good news. I appreciate Matt staying with it, as well as Chris. The value we get out of VAMWA is just fabulous. So it's good news all the way around.
All right, then I don't have any questions, sir. Carry on, Mr. Britton.
There was one other matter, the Dominion Power broadband easements. It's got a fancy name, but basically Dominion has easements over county and service authority property. And that's obviously so that they can run power. In addition to that, they are allowed under their current easements to run broadband, but they can only use the internet at their own facilities. So they would be their own end user, and they're not selling it to themselves commercially. And that's what the easements allow right now. In order to enhance the rural broadband initiative, and this is quite complex, there's a lawyer, where he is, but he's an expert in this area. I did speak with him when this came up in front of the county, and I think the board should know the county has already gotten these easements and endorsed them, and I did a full report as well there. But basically, it's extremely complex. I did dive into it. I reviewed it all, and I also spoke with Dominion Power. They did a presentation in front of the Board of Supervisors showing the heat map of where the facilities are, what the county will be getting out of it, who the third-party provider is, and where that broadband will go, and the guarantees in place. So stepping backwards, Dominion can only provide internet to their own facilities. They can't sell it. They can't be a middle mile provider, is what it's called. By law, a power company cannot be an end provider. They can't sell it to your home, but they can be a middle mile provider to a last mile provider, which would be an internet company. And so they have in place, we reviewed the contract, a contract with the last mile provider, and they have this contract in other localities and other regions as well. Dominion assured us that they would enforce that and make sure that the last mile provider was in fact providing internet services over the Dominion easements to the places that they said they would provide it. And the last mile provider has every incentive to do that, or else Dominion will stop letting them use Dominion's easements throughout Virginia. So it's a good deal, really, for the county. We don't pay for it. We don't get paid for it. It's an easement expansion. So it allows Dominion to run the internet that they already have and become a middle mile provider and get a contract with a last mile provider to provide broadband through King George County and then into the northern neck. And so this requires a public hearing because it is on the Board of Supervisors side, because it is a disposition of real property. Whether or not y'all want to hold a public hearing is certainly up to you. Typically, we have held public hearings for the disposition of real property for the service authority. And so I would suggest that you advertise for a public hearing for the disposition of real property through an easement, expanding the easement previously granted to Dominion so that they can become a middle mile provider and run fiber optic or other cable on their currently existing easements to a last mile provider.
Do I have questions from directors? Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I guess the only question, when you're talking about expansion, you're not talking about the size, you're just talking about changing the language of what they're allowed to have in the easement that they currently have. Are you talking about the physical size of it?
No, the first.
Okay.
This is just a cable in a.
Yeah, you're just allowing them to add something into an easement that already exists.
Allowing them actually to use something that already exists. Yes, no, it's no expansion of the footprint, no expansion of the land, no expansion of the easement. And that's why really you're only changing the use, the scope of the easement. You're not actually disposing of real property any differently than it is now. So it's a little bit of a gray area whether it even requires public hearing. However, if you did have a public hearing, I'm sure that Dominion would be perfectly happy to come and give you the visual presentation. It was good. It wasn't like super long and incredibly detailed. And it did give you information about where these easements are and what it would be served. And I thought it was I thought it was a good presentation. And that would allow that. And also any objection from the public saying, I don't think this should happen. I can't imagine anyone not wanting better internet in King George, but in case you felt that was an issue. But to your point, you probably don't need a public hearing. That is the safest course for any later challenge.
Mr. Morris?
This property that's in the packet, it's the only one that affects Service Authority, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's a whole bunch, obviously, of county property, and I'm sure it would be the same presentation when they would just highlight with a different color the Service Authority property and show you why that's necessary or critical or what would happen if you said no.
Okay, thank you.
Ms.
Madam Chair, may I?
Go ahead, Mr. Weekly.
We have two well lots out there. One has the elevated tank. The other is just the well lot. This is the well lot without the tank. I don't think I've ever taken you on a tour, but this is a well lot. That's what's there.
Ms. Bender?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Cleveland?
I don't have any questions.
I have no questions. So with that, is there a preference to go ahead and move forward with the county attorney's recommendation to advertise a public hearing? So can I have a motion to that effect, please?
I will make a motion to advertise a public hearing about the disposition of
The expansion of the Dominion Power easements to provide middle mile broadband.
what Mr. Britton just said.
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Britton.
Thank you, that's all, Madam Chair.
Very good then. We will move on to action items. I'm sorry, yeah, we don't have any presentations and reports, correct, Mr. Weekly? So we can go ahead and move on to action items. We have a Drinking Water Week proclamation. Would you like to read it, Mr. Weekly, or would you like me to go ahead and read it?
Your
Wanna
preference,
provide
Madam
some
Chair.
background first, please?
Yes, so last year was the first year I brought this to the board. It's just it's a boilerplate proclamation that American Water Works Association puts out, but it fits us because we have a water conservation and management plan. There's conservation language in here. So there are things in our conservation plan that they like to see us do, as well as post things on our website. So we're educating the public, we're educating the board, we're educating KG staff. So this is just recognizing the importance and the value and the very scarce resource of drinking water, and how important it is for, not only for cooking, for consumption, definitely through all this COVID situation we've been dealing with. So this is really, I don't want to belittle it by saying check in the box, but it would help bring awareness to the quality and the importance of drinking water, also staying committed to our water conservation management plan. And then, of course, just as last year, if the board approves, we'll put this on the website, and we'll notify DEQ when we go through any annual reviews, hey, this is one of the things we did to bring awareness.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Weekly before I read the resolution? No? Very good, then I'll go ahead and read the resolution. King George County Service Authority Board of Directors, proclamation of Drinking Water Week. Whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas only tap water delivers public health protection, fire protection, support for our economy, and the quality of life we enjoy, and whereas any measure of a successful society, low mortality rates, economic growth and diversity, productivity, and public safety are in some way related to access to safe water. And whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which future generations depend, and whereas each citizen of our county is called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, to practice water conservation, and to get involved in local water issues by getting to know their water. Now, therefore, be it resolved that by virtue of the authority vested in me as chairman of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors, I do hereby proclaim May 2nd through 8th, 2021 as Drinking Water Week. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the resolution as just presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Weekly.
Thank you very much. And I would say, Madam Chair, regulatory bodies work a calendar week from Sunday to Saturday. So if you see the 2nd through the 8th, we went back and double checked, but that's why it starts on the Sunday.
All right, then we'll move on to the next action item, budget and rates. Mr. Weekly.
Thank you very much. So at the last meeting, we covered budget, but there are obviously things that have to go in effect to, by means if we're increasing revenue or however we're projecting revenue, we need to show that. And the way we receive revenue obviously is through our rates. And anytime there's a rate adjustment, that would be a decrease or an increase, that is covered by an amendment to our policy, and only the board of directors can do that. So just like last year, Matt and I worked on the edits within Section 30. That's where we deal with general rate policy and rate schedule. So I didn't give you everything of page 30. I just did highlights for the packet so you can see what was changed. It's really just the rates that are part of the 5-year plan. So Mr. Dines, if you can go, yep, start right there. Thank you, sir. So just on the cover page, it's just going to reflect, assuming the action the board takes here tonight, I am prepared to ask the board to authorize for advertisement, and Mr. Morris has that motion if and when we get to that moment. So the cover page is just assuming when the rates will be passed. I'm going to ask for a public hearing for June the 1st, and then the board look to go through all, adopting and passing via resolution. Ms. Hahn will be before you that night, and/or Ms. Cobb, to present those resolutions. So June 15 recognizes when you could, or most likely, approve the budget, which would approve the rates. Next slide, please. So this covers the wastewater debt fees, or the water and wastewater service debt fees. Those are fixed fees. So this page and the next page show the rates will go into effect July 1st. And then the customer actually won't see that until their September bill, because we bill bi-monthly. So this reflects the increase to the fee. This first tier is a consumption fee. I do want to point out that we took advantage to address some of the language. We had different tiers in the past, and it mentioned 5/8 meters and other meters, and it just it just wasn't clear. So with the advice of Matt and Patty and myself, we went through and cleaned a lot of that up. So basically, you have consumption up to 10,000 gallons. Your rate for water will be $5.39 per thousand. For the wastewater side, per thousand up to 10,000 will be $12.58. And then tier 2, that measure consumption deals with rates above 10,000. So let's say you had 11,000 gallons. Your first 10,000 would be at that rate at tier 1 we talked about. That next 1,000 and beyond would be at the tier 2 rate. And that's what we try to convey, and cleared up, got rid of some of the meter sizing. So for the tier 2 meter consumption above 10,000 gallons for the water, it'll be assessed at $6.15 per thousand gallons. The wastewater would be assessed at $13.67 per thousand gallons for use, again, over 10,000. The bi-monthly rate, the debt fees, so you, depending on if you're a water or sewer customer or both, these are fixed fees. The flat water debt fee will be $38.86. For the flat sewer debt fee, that rate is at $63.43. And the last fixed cost that you see on your bill is a capital reserve fee. And I want to say this goes back to maybe 2016. The board of directors passed that, and basically it's a good structure to start putting money towards capital plans. I know it's a lower fee out of everything we have on the bill. For FY22, that's in the regulations, we have it at $2.38 per 5-year plan, but at least it's a start to put towards capital. But those reflect the rates for the upcoming FY22 year. So those were the only 3 pages that had any reference. Can you please zoom in? Because that's the only thing about an ad. It's small print. So any questions on the changes to the Section 30 amendments before I get into the advertisement?
Questions from directors? Go ahead, Ms. Cleveland.
Just for clarity, this is reflecting that 4% with the restructure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? No? All right, carry on, Mr. Weekly.
All right, thank you. And I apologize for the small font. As the best we can do when things get prepared for the ad. Really, the only thing that's going to change, unless you ask for a change tonight, the logo will go up top in the advertisement. LaWanda does a fabulous job taking care of that. This year, and I appreciate council's comment, and I know we had discussions in our agenda meeting. In the past, we really haven't shown our budget. We've gone over it in the work sessions, but to really have it broke out so the public can see the revenues of how we receive those. So there are, the stream of revenues mentioned there is your charge for services. We have at $6,907,959. The non-revenue receipts is $82,118. for a total revenue for FY '22 of $6,990,077. On the expenditure side, roughly a year ago, the Board of Directors advised Finance Department and myself to condense from 4 budget categories to 2, and you really see that reflected more on the expenditure side. And again, these numbers haven't changed since our last budget work session, but I wanted to take the time, since we're talking about authorizing me for advertisement, I explained what you have before you. So the 2 categories is Water Department and Sewer Department, and of course we have pledges to our reserve fund balance, capital projects, the debt service that goes with it. So for our Water Department, the expenditures budgeted for FY '22 is $1,776,352. Sewer, by nature, a lot more facilities, a lot of aging facilities. The expenditures are $3,363,221. The reserve fund balance, if you remember last year, or which is the budget we're in now, was the first year we started programming monies towards our reserve fund balance to build that up. And basically, the restructuring that occurred for some of our debt service, so over 5 years, it's roughly $800,000 a year. So it's about $4 million. When Davenport came and gave the presentation, it's about $4 million over 5 years, total $4 million, what they call freed up cash. You can build up reserve funds. You can possibly, if the board of directors want to cash fund some projects, pay down some debt, whatever, that's the board's prerogative. So this year we have budgeted in that reserve fund balance of $379,859. For capital projects funds, that is at $71,472. I believe that comes over from the county. There's always a small portion until it's paid off, the industrial park pump station upgrades. The county thankfully put monies towards that. So there is a transfer of county funds, but we have to show that on our side. The capital projects fund, the debt service, so that's truly our debt payment, our annual debt payment. I think we pay it twice a year, but this is the total of that debt payment is just under $1.4 million. So that brings the total expenditures of $6,990,077, which does give you, Madam Chair and members of the board, a balanced budget for FY '22. Below the budget is what you would normally see in our advertisement. So the rates that were reflected in the amendments for Section 30 show up here in the advertisement. We didn't cut out certain things, and I'll take direction from the board here tonight if there are things you'd like to see us just to cut this advertisement a little more. For example, connection fees, they're a source of revenues, right? But there were no, we're going to keep the prevailing rates. There's no new increase, and we just communicated that there. The other fees we just talked about are under the usage fees, which are also covered in the regulation amendments. Bulk water sales, no increase there, but we do list that because there are folks that haul water. We do fairly well. We're not, breaking any records, but we do, I think, between 9,000 to 12,000 a year on bulk water sales. We have to be careful, make sure we don't violate any groundwater withdrawal, but those are our rates for any of bulk water haulers. Unusual wastewater fee, we really don't get into that, but if we were accepting any of that type of material at a wastewater plant, that's the fee. Septic disposal fee, same thing. We're not active in that program yet. I've said over the last couple of years, once we get our solids handling a real handle, I guess not to play off that word, but in the feasibility study and in our joint meeting in March, I talked about an additional solids handling facility possibly in the future. So when we feel like we have our solids managed where we can take septic, by all means we'll do so because it's a revenue source as well. And we want to take advantage of that. There's a lot of trucks go every day down to Little Falls. No offense to our Stafford County neighbors here tonight, but we like to take advantage of that. I know Craig's and others that are in this county could take advantage of that. Account deposits and tampering fees, they all stay the same, and we don't expect people tampering. We've got good customers. The bi-monthly bill, that again is rolled up into the rate, so it depends if you're a minimum use customer, which is up to 3,000 gallons, or you're an average customer. So those rates, again, spelled out in the 5-year plan, spelled out in the edit. So this is the advertisement that we plan on publishing if the board sees fit. I'm basically asking for authorization to advertise the FY22 budget and regulation amendments. And Mr. Morris has that motion in front of you tonight if you choose to consider so.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Questions from directors? Mr. Parker, no. Mr. Morris, any questions, sir? Ms. Bender? Nope. We're good? Yes? Okay. All right. I don't have any questions. Is there a motion?
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors authorize the advertisement and public hearings in order to consider and to adopt the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget and to set, fix, and classify the fiscal year 2021-2022 water and sewer rates, fees, and charges as set forth in the schedule adopted in the 5-year rate plan in 2019, and to make associated amendments to the King George County Public Service Authority regulations, all as presented and as required by law.
Madam Chair, I apologize. Mr. Britton, will it be okay if we need to put the public hearing date in there. Can we add June 1st,
June 1st.
5:30 p.m. in the Rivercombe building, please?
Go ahead and amend your motion, sir.
I'd like to amend the motion and add that we will have a public hearing on June 5th, June 1st at 5:30 at the Rivercombe building.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Weekly. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not hear you.
Nay.
Okay, so let the record show, Ms. Bender, you're clerk, right? So we'll record.
Ms.
4-1.
Cleveland voted nay.
Thank you very much. All right then. Mr. Weekly, do you have anything else?
Nothing under discussions, ma'am. Just the general manager's report when you're ready for that.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right. So a little bit of water information. So some of our groundwater withdrawal permits have a variety of requirements. This is the next one that's scheduled in our timeline. We've got a draft aquifer test plan will be submitted to DEQ to review. Basically, they put well loggers to check depth during pump down, see if there's any, not only impact to that well, but they look at wells around that area. We've had multiple discussions with DEQ, try to narrow down the requirements. They feel like they have plenty of data at Fairview Beach. That would have been the easiest for us and the least costly. So we believe we've had a good understanding and that they will approve Canterbury as the site. What we're asking for in addition to is to remove the requirement for Circle since it's in close proximity, because these aquifer test plans generally will cover 3, 4, 5 miles out beyond. So we'll see if DEQ likes the plan once it's submitted, but it's almost in final form to submit. And Draper, their geologist has worked on that, and we had some site visits to kind of narrow down what that would look like. We don't anticipate any public disruption, but we'll most likely put a KG alert out, especially if we get into any trucking of water. Our plan, if approved, is we would keep one well online or basically allow us to fill. There may be some that goes over an overflow, so it does look like wasted water and it'll go to a ditch, but we're not taking a well offline. We can actually keep up. So we don't anticipate any customer outages, but we will put a KG alert out because anytime you see water running down a ditch, you think you got a water leak. So we will communicate that. Been working with Legacy and Engineering and Mr. Taylor, who owns the property. It's around 82, 84 lots. We've talked about in the past. Potomac Landing, but it's the Potomac Landing Fairview Beach area is served by the same water and sewer. As you may recall, in the past, I brought a path forward to the board. One of those was getting an approval of the Water Conservation Management Plan, which gives us a 10% increase in our permit with our withdrawal limits to allow us to even serve the water. We have that approval from DEQ now, so we continue on. So the next step, Thursday, myself, Draper, and Legacy Engineering, who represents Mr. Taylor, along with BDH and DEQ, we're going to talk about next steps so we can continue to move along. It could eventually work towards a service agreement. So undoubtedly, I'll be working with Travis and Matt from the staff side, and then push that up to the board. They're talking about committing to drilling a new well, adding storage tanks out there, which will go beyond, I believe, even with projected flow demands that they need for their development. We've had one of our 3 wells that has been inactive for some time. It's the Potomac Landing well lot, the one that had some cleanup recently done and some seeding and straw just happened. That has been offline. So we're left with Fairview Beach 2 and Fairview Beach 3. Number 3 is an older well, may be fine, but anytime they're requiring an additional drawdown testing, older wells concern me. So the play would be, if the board and everything aligns, we would ask DEQ to allow this well to be drilled and go online before doing any pump testing of the older well at Fairview Beach 3. I don't want to have some, not saying something would happen, but if it were, you're left with 1 well, and I don't, I don't like that. That keeps me up at night. So we're moving along, and everyone's on the same page. We'll just see where it goes. There are no guarantees, but that's where we're at in the process. Did meet with the Mueller rep. That's another meter provider. So we've talked with Fortiline in the past, who provides our existing meters, the Camstruck meter, which also has an AMI platform. And basically, we give them the same parameters. This is the amount of customers. This is the size of service. Tell us what you can do for us. So it gets us a little closer, at least from a knowledge standpoint, to where we can eventually, hopefully, kick this out with board approval for an RFP. I do want to take a look at Halifax, is a similar county to us, similar size, rural nature, to look at their RFP. And when we can put eyes on it to see if it really meets our criteria and look to bring it forward to the board. I believe there's annual revenue we're not collecting. So it's not only a revenue source. You don't want to have artificial inflation of your rates if you're not collecting everything that's due. New meters do bring new water bills, so I am sensitive to that. It is possible that customers and commercial customers, both residential and commercial, the bill may go up. The good part of the AMI is that you're capturing that usage, but you also have the service that backs it up, meaning you can give a printout, or there's a customer portal that they can view their usage. So it's not us just saying, this is what you use. Let's go talk about it. And you really educate your use. You may not know that irrigating your yard causes this, or, you know what, I had, 2 aunts and uncles and kids that came over and it was that time period. So it is a good education tool, but it helps us on our water audit. There's at least a couple of systems that I want to say we're in the 40% range of water loss. The rest of them are below 20. That's good. If you're below 10% between your water sales and water production, that's what they consider water loss, then you're doing great. But it will help us there. So again, the goal is not to just keep hammering people, but you don't know what you don't know. If you have new revenues, maybe the board, we can take another look at that rate. So it's not, giving false hope, but it's a reason for that program, not to mention the savings on staff time and fuel and everything else. So anyway, that's just taking us a little closer to possibly bringing forth an RFP for approval. On the wastewater side, we do have our advertising. We have a vacant department head position for wastewater management. Not only do we have that through the normal, you can get it through Indeed, but we have it posted Virginia Rural Water. So it's going around in the trade publications. On a national level, not only in the state, but national level, American Water Works Association. Patty sent that over. We got confirmation. It's live. It's on those sites. So hopefully it'll generate a good candidate pool. I think we have a couple candidates now. It's still early on. So hopefully folks will start, applying very soon. Wiley and Wilson, we've been looking at this Dalgren wastewater treatment plant, some equipment out there. We believe we're getting close. We're looking at our power demand to make sure we have enough power to serve any kind of new upgrade equipment, but it would be retrofitting or replacing the rotors that are out there. I know, Mr. Morris, you've seen it. It's just those discs that turn. So hopefully we're getting a little closer where we can get some specifications together in another RFP. The funding for that is in the FY22 budget. I think it's about $121,000 line item if we go with the type of mixing aeration piece of equipment. I believe it's a quantity of 6. DEQ, I did send an official letter that we completed our Priority 1 pump station projects. That's great news. You always want to be able to stick to your plan and achieve your plan. Priority 1 projects had 12 months to complete, a shorter timeline. Moving forward, Priority 2 and Priority 3 each have 24-month timelines. So not only helps you from a planning standpoint, it helps you from a fiduciary standpoint. So maybe we can do it through our operating funds and not debt service. I'm trying not to bring you any debt service projects if I can help it. So fence repair, we've had this on the books for a few weeks. It's just, believe it or not, folks are backlogged. But our fencing at the Fairview Beach main pump station it needs some repair. And pretty much that whole fencing will be out and new put in. I don't know if it was a staining or maintenance. I can't explain what it is. I just know it needs to be replaced. It's an eyesore and it could be a safety issue as well. And then we just made a force main repair near the Marina Pump Station. That's down near at Rick's. And that's important because they're getting ready to open up, I believe, either Friday or Saturday of this week. So want to make sure that's good to go. Other information, appreciate Travis including me in on the I guess you call it selection committee, is reviewing the professional engineering and services submittals. Very wide range of professionals that submitted, very impressive. But it was interesting, he put together a very good panel because there's different needs. There's parks and recs, there's water and sewer, you don't want to hear about this guy. There's community development side, there's all kinds of stormwater management. So we just had our first round of interviews today. There will be more ongoing this week. And I think maybe mid-May we're looking at as far as selection. So that's where we're at in the process. Hope I didn't steal any of your report for a later meeting. And just some plan review. I thought occasionally I need to put that in there so you know that our office does plan review. One thing that we're not doing and we should probably take a look at, we don't charge for plan review. I believe there was just an adjustment on rate structure through community development. Our regulations basically just say charge, whatever your cost is involved, but you really need to treat that too like, do you do that as like you would before you, where it's the lowest responsible person that's at the lower rate that's doing that, or do we just want a fixed rate? We probably should just do a fixed rate because I just won't hand this over to anybody, but we do not currently charge. So if that's something the board would like us to do, we can certainly do that. There is time involved. That's not me complaining about it. I'm doing it. You've hired me. That's just part of my job. But if there's a rate structure, we certainly can take a look at that. Some of our fleet vehicles are finally getting here. I know COVID delayed a lot. They are a larger size vehicle, but I believe they're actually going to save some gas. How they can explain that with their these are Dodge Ram vehicles. We're replacing the Nissan Frontiers. So 7 of those came in. They are leased vehicles. So for public that are watching, we did not buy outright 7 vehicles. They are leased. And we felt it met our need because there was some equity in the other ones and you can get new vehicles. And actually, I think we lowered our payment by a few dollars a month on each one of these vehicles. Attended the Virginia Rural Water Conference was virtual this year. Made it a little interesting. It's usually good to go down and network with folks and see all the exhibits. That's how you see the products that are out there and services. And the good thing about it is I obtained continuing education credits as well as our water manager for our licenses. So that's great. You didn't have to pay to put us up in a hotel. You did pay a smaller fee. We got some credits out of it. And just lastly, I want the chair requested KGI to be present at an upcoming meeting. I just confirmed with them. I think it was late last week, but they'll be here for your June 1st meeting. With that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation or my report.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Questions from members? Good. You have none?
No questions, ma'am.
Very good, Mr. Morse.
Mr. Weekly, forgive me if I don't remember all the details, but the other day, I don't know if it was a King George alert or something, but I got notification we had some issue at, I think it was Nines. Well, is that correct? And what was the issue?
Thank you, sir. So Nines, I'm actually glad you brought that up, and I'm going to tie it into these alarm stations you've been hearing so much about on the wastewater side. We need to put alarm systems in our well facilities also. So what happened there, we had a breaker trip. The booster pump wasn't pulling water out of the storage tank to put it in the hydro tank to give pressure. In those situations, unless you have alarm notification, who calls you? The customer, unfortunately. You know, people getting up, getting ready for work. So fortunately, I think those calls came in after 5. We were able to have that up, water in the system, I think shortly before 7. We try to make sure we observe the system before putting it out. So a lot of times things may be put back online before you get the alert, but that's what's happened there. So one of the things, Delta Environmental, who's reps the mission controls that we've installed on the sewer, we brought them in to talk about the water. We want to tie them into obviously elevated tank levels, pressure levels. So we will be looking to do that this year. It's just unfortunate we don't have those systems in place right now. It's just an honest answer to you. It's embarrassing to say we don't have those things, but we don't, and we will look to install the proper alert so we are getting it before the customer knows and they're impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Ms. Bender.
I don't have anything.
Ms. Cleveland.
Could you explain what you mean by that Hop Yard utility plan? I don't understand what you mean by that. You had said that you can charge for it.
Oh, plan review. Sorry. So any plan reviews that come through, just like community development has a rate structure. So if they may be looking at stormwater, we look at water, sewer, how those other structures, whether storm or whatnot, in development that will impact us. So it's basically your rate that you charge to review those plans. So just like community development reviews, I don't know if they look at roadways. I know they look at stormwater. There's a fee associated for plan review. We are currently not charging. The regulations say that we can charge, you know, basically the cost of review. It doesn't outline a rate structure, but we are not currently charging. And I do all the review in-house for Service Authority.
Who would you charge?
It's a good question. I don't know if that gets passed on to the developer or if it's the engineering firm that submits that. I'm not sure. You have developer, so it would be a developer cost.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. You actually brought up the issue that I was going to inquire about. I wanted to poll the directors to see if there was any interest in adopting that suggestion for, obviously not for right now, but if Mr. Weekly, if everyone wanted him to look into it, what would that fee schedule for services look like for possibly implementation next year? Ms. Cleveland? I'm going to go down the line and just poll everyone to make sure if everyone is in agreement, we can direct him to
Yeah,
look into
absolutely.
it and
Yes.
report back to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bender.
I'd say yes, and also, do other localities do this normally?
I have to check in. The other localities I've worked for, which were 3, did not, but I'm not sure if that was built in on the back end, because usually community development departments are the gatekeeper. I don't know if there was a fee structure maybe I wasn't aware of. I just know I never charged for my time. But I do want to distinguish, there's a difference between a small as-built that comes for you, like Peds Plus, for example, versus a multiple developed area. You have to make sure you spend a lot of time, because it matters where valves go or meter box. Did they put it in somebody's driveway where it should have been in the yard? So some of these are more intensive. But I'll definitely be looking around at other localities to see if they charge and what that rate fee is.
I'm glad you said that, because I know in some of the developments we've had recently, you've put in a lot of effort and work in investigating, which is staff time that you couldn't use on something else.
Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I'd be interested in the information. Also, roughly how many reviews a year does the office handle?
Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I'd be interested in the information.
And I am as well. So you have consensus of the board to go ahead and put together some information based on all the comments mentioned here by members. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right then, and that was the only question I had. So seeing no information items, I believe we're ready to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we adjourn until May 18th, 2021 at 5:30 PM here in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.